While Sammy Walker was lighting it up at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, the Minnesota Wild made a depth signing. We'll talk about what Jujhar Khaira brings to the Minnesota Wild. Plus, are the Wild going to even be able to afford to have him up with the big club all season? We'll discuss that and more today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes throughout the course of the week. Today's episode of Locked on Wild features Alex Micheletti as we will discuss the Jujhar Khaira signing to a two-way contract, what he could potentially bring, and what it means for the regulars in the Minnesota Wild lineup. Interesting notes from Michael Russo and Dean Evason's conversation that we will discuss. Press the Prospect Showcase. We'll see who lit it up and who had other good performances throughout the weekend, and potential lineup tweaks for the Wild. They're at least being floated. So we'll discuss whether or not they are actually legit on today's episode as well. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. Joining us on a midday Micheletti Tuesday is Alex Micheletti. And we were hoping to do this last night, but I'm not going to put the hotel that I was at on blast. It's basically dial-up internet, as I'm sure everybody saw in last night's Philip Gustafson season preview episode, which usually takes about 5 minutes to upload the audio version. It took 2 hours and 45 minutes for that to upload. So I was really sweating that last night, and the video portion was not great. And so my apologies there. But again, didn't think that that would be an issue coming back into Minnesota. But nonetheless, we're here, and we're talking about plenty here with Alex today. Alex, the first big one is while the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase was going on, the Wild made a signing. They ended up signing of the Chicago Blackhawks last year, Jujhar Khaira, to a one-year, two-way contract worth $775,000 or $300,000 if he spends most of the season at the AHL level. He's 29 years old and registered 14 points, 6 goals, 8 assists, and 31 penalty minutes in 51 games with Chicago last season. The big thing of note here for Khaira, 6'4", 212 pounds. And so kind of a fringe depth guy, but I found it interesting in Michael Russo's discussion with Dean Evason. It sounds like somebody is a little banged up and will be at least through the preseason and training camp. So kind of a depth body here to start the season to potentially help if anybody misses time. With getting somebody that's 6'4", that really narrows down who it could possibly be.
Yes, yeah, big time. And this is a player that he's kind of he's been in the league for a bit, and so it's nice to have someone that actually has NHL playing experience. And adding size to this group that tends to be on the smaller side, that's a win. I remember him all the way back in his college. He played for Michigan Tech for a season and then went to junior. And I was at Mankato at the time working for Minnesota State. And so I remember him when he was at Michigan Tech. And it's a really interesting, journey for some of these players. They have to change their style to make it into the NHL, going to the next level. Sometimes when you're growing up and you're in that junior level or college level, you're a top line guy, but to make it into the NHL, you have to become a grinder, fight, be on the fourth line, be on the penalty kill, win faceoffs. And so that's kind of what he's, had to do to, survive and stay in the in the best league in the world, and so it's not a it's a good gamble on a guy that's still relatively young at 29. That's not, I don't think, archaic, even though the league continues to get younger. But like I said, it's nice to have a guy with NHL experience in case of an injury, or guys are banged up, that they can put in, and hopefully he can at least be a 13th forward and stay in the press box if needed. But nice to have that insurance.
Some interesting quotes. Michael Russo talked to Dean Evason for a lengthy sit down that was 2 parts on The Athletic. For those that have The Athletic, encourage you to read that. Some good insight as to some things that we could potentially see this year, which we'll talk about at the end of the show today. But I found these quotes in regards to the health of the team very interesting. This from Dean Evason answering Michael Russo's questions, the first of which is, everybody healthy coming into camp who was hurt in the playoffs? And Dean says, yeah, pretty much everybody is. There's a couple of bumps that we might not see at the start of the training camp, but I don't want to skate them at this time, because if it doesn't transpire, then I don't want to leak that somebody's been a little bit banged up. And so Russo responds with, but nobody has a serious injury that will keep them out for a while. And Evason says, no. Everybody, as far as the surgeries or the recoveries like Eriksson Ek and Kaprizov, are fully good to go. So there might be a couple of guys that maybe don't make it for the first couple of days. We have 3 days of practice, then our first game when camp opens Thursday. You'll see the guy that I'm speaking of. And Russo adds at the end of the piece, I get the impression that one forward who was hurt at the end of 2022-2023 has a different injury heading into camp, and that's part of why the Wild signed Khaira to a 2-way contract. He's a big body, a center, isn't afraid to fight, and is a good penalty killer. It's helpful to also have another $775,000 league minimum guy for call-ups. At the start, Khaira, Lettieri, Nick Patan, Nick Swaney, and Stephen Fogarty have much better chances of being recalled than Adam Beckman and Sammy Walker, who make in the high $800K as opposed to $700. So I love the Schadenfreude that we see with NHL coaches, to where there just is no revealing anything. You can kind of narrow it down, but there's no revealing of anything that could be, potentially detrimental or could be any sort of an advantage for early season opponents. This is 100% being done for Florida for the start of the season, and it just made me chuckle that it's like, yeah, we got some guys who might be a little banged up, but you'll just have to wait, I guess, and see once things start ramping up at training camp.
Yeah, it's Dean being Dean. He's always keeps things interesting for speculation. That's for sure. Yeah, it's it's going to be interesting training camp. Still trying to figure out Addison too, and getting him signed. And so, it's interesting. They have, Addison's been around the team. Same thing with Mason Shaw, and the team is kind of just letting them be around the team, even though they're not signed, which is, in this day and age, isn't really normal. But it's just what the organization is doing, and so interesting on that part. And then, yeah, this is a Wild lineup that you only have a couple guys that are really that are set in that same line, but you have guys that could bounce all over the place. And so, yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Chris O'Hearn is definitely earning his paycheck with trying to calculate with the cap, and it's going to be like that. They're going to be counting dollars all season, and then just praying that there isn't an injury like Eriksson Ek, where a guy is out, not just for one game, but multiple games, because then you have to count every single day a guy going up and down. You're paying him at his NHL salary. No, you're paying him at his AHL salary. Yeah, that can't be easy. And then, if they're on a road trip, flying the guy out there, logistically trying to make it work, so that they can get to a game. Yeah, it's going to be, planes, trains, automobiles type moments this season for the Wild, for sure.
as long as nobody has to ride with John Candy and his polka band,
Yeah,
as was the case in Home Alone. As long as nobody has to do that around various portions of the country, I think we'll be fine. But boy, oh boy, just hire a full-time accountant
exactly.
to keep up with all that because it's making my head hurt. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that Dean Evason had to say with Michael Russo. Some interesting things regarding the lineup that we'll discuss as well. But we are going to talk a little bit about the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. There will be a full breakdown of everything that happened at the Prospect Showcase coming later this week. Just kind of getting organized after being out of state all weekend. So be on the lookout for that coming up later this week. But we will continue today's episode of Locked On Wild, talking a little bit about the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase after this. Get started with NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And unfortunately for the Minnesota Vikings, there has been much more losing than winning. But hey, at least Justin Jefferson is hitting all of his props. Kirk Cousins has been off to a good start as well. So even though the Vikings haven't hit their wins yet, plenty of Vikings players are winning through FanDuel. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started this NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild, once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For the everydayers, make sure you tune in tomorrow as we will take a look at Marc-Andre Fleury's 2023-2024 season expectations. We'll take a look at what the Wild need from him and what we can expect statistically from the Flower, as well as he's on milestone watch this season. We'll discuss a little bit of that as well. For today, Alex Micheletti joining us, and let's talk a little bit about the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. Plenty of Wild prospects on display, and especially in the case of the final game of the showcase, Sammy Walker with a hat trick to lead the Minnesota Wild, but there were plenty of other players that chipped in as well. Get a load of this for stats. Sammy Walker had 3 goals and an assist for 4 points. Maxim Kakovic had 1 goal and an assist. Casey Dornbach had a goal and an assist. Luis Boudon and Rasmus Kumppelainen scored, and Harrison Mengen and Chase Coward made 31 saves to lead the Wild to a 7-4 win versus Chicago. In the final game of the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, Kyle Masters had 3 assists. Hunter Height had 2 assists in the game for the Wild against Chicago, excuse me. So Sammy Walker again showing that he has what it takes to play at the NHL level. So now for him, just kind of waiting for the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, he's he's kind of stuck like Adam Beckman there, who's been waiting a couple of years. With Sammy, he kind of mentioned it too when they talked about it. That Sammy was playing so well is that he was older than a couple of or a lot of the guys that were in this prospect tourney, and so he thought he could be a leader and really dominate. And the first game against the Blues, the puck, he said he was frustrated that the puck wasn't going in. And so then he took it out on the Blackhawks and got that hat trick. And I think he had 5 shots on goal too. So, he was, he really wanted to prove a point, that, he could dominate, like he thought he would. And so, yeah, it was impressive to see him do that, especially after Bedard had all the, the noise the night before getting a hat trick against the Blues. Watching him was incredible. So it was nice for the Wild, and Sammy Walker to get that praise the next day against the Blackhawks without Connor Bedard. So and nice, that Maxime kid is the guy that they got in the trade for Pat Maroon too. So nice to see him, show his skill as well. But yeah, you just got a bunch of guys that are on the brink of being in the NHL. But it's it's tough to make that team, especially with the major cap constraints that they still have. So you kind of feel for some of these guys, but Sammy's still very young. 23? So
Yeah.
So he's still got a long ways in his hockey career here. So if he has to abide his time, it's I think he understands it too, but he still wants to prove that he's ready to go if called upon.
Well, the interesting thing that I thought was Bill Guerin's comments to his prospects within the Wild system is like, yeah, it's cool that Connor Bedard is coming here, but he's just another hockey player. Like there's no need for those guys pedestalize him and kind of get intimidated with him being on the ice. Just go out and do your thing, and it's a great message because I'm sure there were plenty of players out there that were like, "Oh my God, it's Connor Bedard. What do I do?" And so he's just trying to kind of say, "Hey, just treat it like another game, and he's going to do his thing. You just go do yours, and let things fall where they may."
Yeah, you have to have that mentality because once you're on the NHL roster and you're playing in the league, you're going to go up against Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon. Bedard's not the only one. So you can't get starstruck. You just have to play your game, and even though you're going up against some of the best in the world, you just have to play to your best ability and not try to be out of body. And you see the result for Sammy Walker, getting the hat trick the next game that he was in. So you just have to prove it. When the lights are on, these are kind of exhibition preseason type of a feel, but when it comes to the regular season, you got to show it, or else you'll be sent down back to the AHL or junior team. So yeah, very, very interesting.
And as mentioned, we'll get a little further dive into the prospect showcase coming up later this week, but just wanted to give you the Cliff Notes version of what we saw. Jesper Wallstedt also had some great saves for his portion of time on ice, and again, just a great showing by the Minnesota Wild, getting prospects from not only them but Chicago and St. Louis all into one place for the prospect showcase. So good work there. Now we're going to finish with some interesting comments in regards to what the lineup could look like this season. Some things that I think a lot of us are excited to hear. And so we'll discuss that and look at whether or not there's a possibility that we actually see some of these tweaks. We'll talk about that as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Whether it be storms, shortages, pandemics, reliance on China, or supply chain issues, we need to be prepared now more than ever. And one place that can help you get peace of mind when disaster strikes is Jace Medical. All you have to do is go online, fill out a form, and then you get prescription life-saving medications right to your door. The Jace case gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. Again, you can save more than $360 on these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Topal and Alex Micheletti hanging out here on a Tuesday edition of Micheletti Monday. Alex, some tweaks could potentially be in the works for the Minnesota Wild lineup. Again, from Michael Russo's sit down with Dean Evason. Let's talk a little bit about what we could see not only on offense, but also on defense. Russo asking, first off, on the Brock Faber front, assuming that Faber will slot into Dumba's spot in the lineup next to Jonas Brodin, at least to start camp. We saw him play great in his 8-game look last season, but he was more of a third-pair defenseman. Brodin, we know, gets all the big matchups against the McKinnons, McDavids, probably Alexander Barkov and or Matthew Tkachuk opening night, Austin Matthews in the second game. Are you confident that Faber's not going to be overwhelmed by that? And if for some reason he is, would you ever try Jared Spurgeon with Jonas Brodin? Dean Evason responds, 100% on everything that you just said. We are confident, but if there's a situation where we feel that maybe he is overwhelmed because of his first year, we don't think that's going to happen, but if he is, it's an easy flip for us to him and Jake Middleton, or even Johnny Merrill or Alex Goligoski and Addison. We've got 7 guys in those guys that we think can all play in the National Hockey League, obviously. But to your point, yes, we have no issues, especially at home, if we needed a pair to look after a special group like the McKinnon group. We would feel, and we've talked about it already, very comfortable putting Brodin and Spurgeon together. What do you think about that?
Yeah, more gamesmanship by Dean, maybe. We'll see if he would actually do that. That, to load up on that would be, very, very interesting. I think it could work, but then, I mean, you're putting your 2 best defensemen on, then there could be shakier pairings with the Wild. Yeah. I mean, some teams can do it. I don't know if the Wild can necessarily do that. Maybe they could do that for a couple shifts of the game, but you're putting a lot of faith into Brock Faber right now. I think he can do it. He has the pedigree. He's done it through every level. So we saw him against Dallas in the playoffs, and he made a game-saving play in one of the games. So, I think he can do it. But, I could definitely see some flexibility. I think the only changes that they would truly make is, moving Faber to third pairing and then having, Addison or Goligoski playing on the second pairing, but or Merrill. But, I don't know if you want to break up Spurgeon and Middleton. I think they've just shown some fantastic chemistry, and you keep those 2 together for sure.
The other one, before we kind of wrap up here today, is what to do about Marco Rossi. Mm-hmm. Russo asks, could you see him, that being Rossi, at times at least, in camp or to start the season, moving up in the lineup? Maybe into a top 6 role between Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello, or Marcus Johansson and Matt Boldy, especially because Ryan Hartman can obviously play center or wing, and Foligno, Hartman, Gaudreau would seem to be a terrific line, especially defensively. Here's what Evason responds with. Yes, I'd probably start with Joel Eriksson Ek to the top line, so maybe there's a position where Rossi, Jojo, and Boldy can play together. Boldy and Marco have had a chemistry together. So, yeah, there's certainly some areas for us to tinker with, not only in camp, but in the preseason. We'll be watching the chemistry very, very closely.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. I mean, I think that's the only way that Marco's gonna have success is by playing in a top 6 role, because I don't know, it's going to be frustrating for him too if he's not scoring, in the third line, and playing with a guy like Foligno and Gaudreau. I don't see the fit, but and it might put Marco in the doghouse right away, and so then, of course, those other guys that want a spot like a Sammy Walker or Adam Beckman or Vinny Lettieri, they're hoping that selfishly they're hoping that it doesn't work for Marco, just so that they get a chance. But I think What really intrigues me is Ek playing with Kaprizov and Zuccarello, and then because I think that line could have a ton of success, and then Hartman playing with a Gaudreau and Foligno, just it makes so much more sense. That's Hartman's a grinder. He's more of a bottom six guy than a top six guy. It's worked for this team, but just with the way Ryan Hartman plays, it's better for him to be in the bottom six, I think. And you hope Marco can take off, because then the lineup looks so much more cohesive with him in the top six role. So we'll see. What the article said, that he put on 15 pounds of muscle, so that I'm intrigued to see that. But we also saw last year in the preseason, Marco was the leading point scorer in the entire league. So in the end, preseason doesn't mean anything. You have to show up when the lights turn on, like I mentioned earlier in the episode. So, but hopefully he's given the chance to have success, be in a role where he can produce, because in the bottom six, I don't think he can. Some players can in the bottom six, but with the players that he would be projected to play with, I don't think they have the skill to help him, produce points. And that, at the end of the day, is a big factor.
Well, and 2 years ago, we did see, before Ryan Hartman got paired with Kaprizov and Zuccarello, we did see Joel Eriksson Ek get a couple of opportunities up there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if I recall correctly, that line destroyed the Winnipeg Jets in one game in particular, the game where Eriksson Ek had the hat trick and had the game winner in overtime. He had like 4 points. I think Kaprizov had 5 points in that game. It was a one-man wrecking crew, and it makes sense for two guys that love to kind of play catch with each other in Kaprizov and Zuccarello. It makes all the sense in the world to have a guy right in front of the net, so that when they pepper shots, he can collect rebounds, he can deflect them in, he can just body the goalie. Why not?
And he's the best defensive forward on the team too, and can help create space. And Zuccarello and Kaprizov don't have to exude so much energy defensively, because they have Ek just being the junkyard dog around everywhere up front, like you said, causing havoc. And what's so great about Ek too is he gets underneath guys' skin on the other team. He won't ever fight really, but he'll just be a pain in the butt. That's what I love about him too, is just he throws guys off their game, so that adds another element to the line for sure if he gets that opportunity.
And as far as those comments from Dean Evason go, it's like when you as a parent give your kid the car to drive to go to a party, and they end up getting like in a fender bender or something, and you ask them, you say, now, before you take the car out again, did you learn your lesson? And they're like, yeah, whatever, just give me the keys. And it's yet to be seen if they just go out and do it again. So these comments are all well and good, but the big thing is going to be implementation and execution of said tweaks in the regular season as necessary.
Yes, 100%. And they can't get off to this tough start like they did last season too. That just throws everything off. It causes chaos. Hopefully with the way the goaltending ended, that they can come into the regular season, on a strong note, because it all starts from the back end. They just couldn't keep the puck out of the net at the beginning of the year, and so hopefully that doesn't happen, and they can get off to a great start. And just like last year, they have some really strong opponents at the beginning to test them to that theory. You have, like you mentioned from the article, Tkachuk and Barkov right away. that is tough. I mean, they're going to be without a couple of their key defensemen in Brandon Montour and Aaron Ekblad, but that team is still pretty strong up the middle. So yeah, they're gonna have to shut down those guys, and then Austin Matthews probably the best goal scorer in the league. So yeah, it's not going to be easy, but if they can have some good success right at the beginning, that they can ride that momentum, and this Central Division is just going to be a dogfight throughout because, I mean, you got teams like Nashville that got a lot better, especially up the middle, getting a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, and Colorado. They just continue to add guys. What we were messaging back and forth, when they signed Thomas Tatar, you're like, he's gonna score 25 goals, and they're. A guy like Jonathan Drouin, who looked like he was, pretty much out of the league. They reunite him with his junior teammate and Nathan McKinnon, and he's probably going to be on the first line and score 30. He said this is what they do. So, it just never ends like with a team like Colorado. And then that's a team that the Wild are going to be fighting for playoff positioning or a playoff spot to begin with.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how the Central Division plays out, but that's for us to start to see in the next couple of weeks, because hockey is on the way before you know it. That will do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. So now that you have finished listening, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification button on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Also follow us on your favorite podcast platforms so that you can stay tuned and up to date with all Minnesota Wild news and notes as we gear up for training camp, then the preseason, then the regular season, starting on October 12th. Locked On Wild has new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. See you tomorrow.